The official designation of his assignment was Forward Logistics Vessel Antares, Cooperative Fleet Registry Number 7-7-4, Delta, attached to the 9th Expeditionary Group as a support asset. The crew called it the Bucket. Jordan Hayes read his posting orders 3 times on the transport out to Kellen Deep Station, not because he did not understand them, but because he was trying to understand the message behind them. He had graduated the academy 4 months ago, first in his class. The Arena 7 record still stood. Commander Rowe had written his commendation herself, which was, by the Academy's own tradition, something she had never done before for any graduate. They had given him the Bucket. The Antares was a Velhari-class medium logistics vessel, 31 years old, rated for cargo transfer, field resupply, and non-combat support operations. It had been flagged for decommissioning twice and pulled back into service twice because the 9th Expeditionary Group was understaffed and under-resourced, and the war with the Xanthian Confederation had a way of consuming ships faster than the shipyards built them. Its primary drive had been repaired 14 times. Its point defense grid had 42% coverage, which meant 58% of the ship had no point defense at all. Its hull had patches on its patches. Its crew complement was 61. 44 were rated combat personnel. Of those 44, 31 had never seen live combat. Of the remaining 13, 9 were medical discharges from other postings, reassigned to the Bucket because it was classified as low risk. Low risk. A logistics vessel with half a point defense grid, a patched hull, and a drive that had been repaired 14 times, attached to an expeditionary group operating in the outer contested zone, where Xanthian patrol activity had increased 40% in the last 8 months. Jordan stood on the docking collar of Kellen Deep Station and looked through the port at the Antares for the first time. It was exactly as bad as the file had suggested. He picked up his bag and walked aboard. The senior crew met him in the main briefing room 2 hours after he boarded. 11 beings around a table that had a crack running down its center that someone had filled with sealant and then apparently forgotten about. Jordan sat at the head of the table and looked at them, and they looked back at him. Chief Engineer Voss was a thar, heavy-set even by their standards, with the careful stillness of someone who had spent 3 decades keeping broken machinery running through sheer refusal to accept its brokenness. She had been on the Antares for 9 years. She knew every fault in the ship the way a doctor knows the chronic conditions of an old patient. Navigation Officer Seal was a Velhari, young, recently graduated from the Velhari Naval Institute, and making no particular effort to conceal her opinion of her current posting. She had ranked second in her class. Her first posting was a logistics vessel with a cracked briefing table. The math of that was not lost on her. Weapons Officer Keth was a Quellian, one of the older crew members, who had been transferred to the Antares after an incident on his previous posting that his file described as a disagreement with command over tactical protocol. The description was so neutral it was clearly hiding something significant. Medical Officer Dara was a breath, a small, 4-limbed species with large eyes and fast hands, which made them exceptional surgeons. She looked at Jordan the way medical officers look at new commanding officers, assessing the likelihood of future work. The rest were department heads of varying species and varying degrees of enthusiasm for their current situation. Jordan looked at all of them. He did not give a speech. He had thought about giving a speech and decided against it, because speeches were for people who needed convincing, and if this crew needed convincing by words, then words were not going to do it. He said, "I've read all your service files. I've read the Antares maintenance logs going back 6 years. I've read the 9th Expeditionary Group's operational reports for the last 8 months." He paused. "I have questions for each department. We'll start with engineering." Voss raised an eyebrow. "Questions?" The primary drive repair log shows the same fault recurring at intervals of approximately 6 weeks. Every repair addresses the symptom. Nobody has addressed the cause. He looked at her. "I want to know why." The room was quiet for a moment. Voss said, slowly, "The parts required to address the root cause are on backorder from Central Supply. Have been for 14 months. "I know," Jordan said. "I have a requisition in with Central Supply dated this morning, escalated to Priority Tier 1 with a Field Commander Authorization Code. We should have parts within 3 weeks." He paused. "In the meantime, I want daily monitoring on the fault point and a contingency procedure if it degrades faster than projected. Can you build that?" Voss looked at him for a long moment. "Yes," she said. I can build that. Jordan moved to navigation, then weapons, then medical, then logistics, communications, and crew readiness. He had a specific, informed question for every department, drawn from the files he had read on the transport out, and for every problem, he had already taken at least one concrete action before walking into the room. The meeting lasted 2 hours and 40 minutes. When it was over, Seal caught Keth in the corridor outside and said, very quietly in Velhari. He read the maintenance logs. Keth, who understood Velhari perfectly well, said, he read everything. Nobody reads the maintenance logs. This one does. They walked in opposite directions. Both of them were thinking. The 9th Expeditionary Group's operational theater was a volume of space roughly 40 light hours across, centered on the Relon corridor, a navigational choke point between Cooperative and Xanthian-controlled space, where the stellar geography made faster-than-light transit predictable enough that both sides had been fighting over it for 6 years. It was not a glamorous theater. It was attritional, grinding, the kind of war that consumed ships and crews and produced no decisive outcomes, just incremental shifts in a front line that moved back and forth by light minutes over the course of months. The Antares operated on the Cooperative side of the corridor, running resupply missions to the forward picket stations, transferring personnel and material between the larger fleet assets, and staying well clear of anything that looked like a fight. For 6 weeks, this was what they did. Jordan used the 6 weeks. He cross-trained crew members across departments, which was not standard practice on a logistics vessel and generated some friction, because beings who had settled into their roles did not always welcome being asked to learn someone else's. He ran emergency drills at irregular hours, which was also not standard practice and generated more friction. He spent 3 hours a day in the engine room with Voss, learning the Antares the way he had learned Arena 7, from the inside, until he knew where every fault was and what it would do under pressure. He ate in the crew mess instead of the officer's bay. He did not explain this. He just sat down with whoever was there and ate and occasionally asked questions about their homeworlds or their previous postings and listened to the answers with the same quality of attention he brought to maintenance logs and tactical assessments. The crew did not warm to him quickly. Alien crews did not warm to human officers quickly in general, and Jordan was not a warming type of person. But they began to watch him differently. The cross-training created reluctant competence. The drills created reluctant readiness. The questions he asked in the mess created, slowly and without anyone quite deciding it had happened, the sense that he was paying attention to them specifically, not to the crew in aggregate. Seal told Keth, 6 weeks in, that she thought the human might actually know what he was doing. Keth said he had thought so after the first meeting. Seal said she did not appreciate being right about things this slowly. The orders came in on the 43rd day. Picket Station Varen, one of the forward monitoring posts in the Relon corridor, had gone dark. No distress signal, no emergency broadcast, just silence at 0340 station time and nothing since. The 9th Expeditionary Group's command assessment was probable Xanthian strike operation, fast and clean, the kind of thing their special operations units had been running with increasing frequency over the past 4 months. The group's response assets were committed. 2 cruisers chasing a Xanthian patrol that had jumped into the secondary corridor. 1 carrier undergoing emergency drive repair at Relon Station. The command vessel itself was 15 hours from Varen at best speed. The nearest available asset was the Antares. The orders were simple. Proceed to Picket Station Varen. Assess status. Render assistance if possible. Hold position until relief arrives. The orders did not say, be advised that Xanthian Special Operations units typically leave a rear guard. The orders did not say, if this is a strike operation, the rear guard will still be there. The orders did not say, you are a logistics vessel with 42% point defense coverage and a primary drive that has been repaired 14 times, and we are sending you because there is nothing else. Jordan read the orders. He called the senior crew to the briefing room. He laid it out plainly, all of it, including the parts the orders had not said. The room was very quiet. Voss said, what's the plan? Jordan told them. When he finished, Seal said, in a voice stripped of all its usual careful neutrality, that is not a standard approach. No, Jordan said. It is not. There is no doctrine for what you just described. I know. It has never been attempted. I know that too. Keth was looking at the tactical display Jordan had pulled up, his Quellian neural architecture processing the geometry of what had been proposed. After a moment, he said, "The timing margins are extremely narrow." "Yes," Jordan said. "If the drive holds." "If the drive holds." Voss said, "The drive will hold." She said it the way she said everything, flat and factual, but there was something underneath it. "I'll hold it together myself if I have to." Jordan looked around the table. He did not ask for a vote. He was not running a democracy. He just looked at them, one by one, and let them look back at him. "Questions?" he said. Nobody had questions. "Then let's go." Picket Station Varen was a small installation, 6 crew, 2 sensor arrays, and a communications relay that fed targeting data to the Cooperative's forward network. It sat in the shadow of a cold brown dwarf at the edge of the Relon corridor, positioned there specifically because the dwarf's gravity well created a predictable FTL exit point that the Xanthians had been probing for months. When the Antares dropped out of faster-than-light transit 200,000 kilometers from Varen, Jordan already knew what they would find. The long-range sensors confirmed it before the visual did. The station was intact, no debris field, no hull breach signatures. That meant it had not been destroyed. It had been taken. A Xanthian strike team had boarded it, neutralized the crew, and seized the communications relay. Alive, probably. The Xanthians were practical about prisoners. And sitting between the Antares and the station, exactly where Doctrine said a rearguard would be, were 2 Xanthian fast attack ships. Not cruisers, not dreadnoughts. Fast attack ships, designed for exactly this kind of operation, small and quick, and armed well out of proportion to their size. Each one outgunned the Antares individually. Both of them together, against a logistics vessel with half a point defense grid, was not a fight. It was an execution. The Xanthian lead ship broadcast a standard challenge. Identify and hold position or be fired upon. Jordan did not respond. On the bridge, Seal turned from her console and looked at him. Keth had his hands on the weapons array. Voss's voice came up from engineering, very steady, telling him the drive was green. Jordan looked at the tactical display. He looked at the geometry of the 2 Xanthian ships, their positions relative to the station, relative to the brown dwarf, relative to the Antares. He had been looking at this geometry in his head since the orders came in. He had been looking at it the way he had looked at Arena 7, finding the dead angles, finding the assumptions the opponent was making that could be turned against them. The Xanthian fast attack ships were positioned correctly for their doctrine. They were covering the 2 standard approach vectors to the station. They had good fields of fire on both. They were sitting in a defensive posture that assumed the approaching vessel would do one of 2 things, comply and hold, or attempt a direct approach and be destroyed. The doctrine had no category for what Jordan was about to do, because what Jordan was about to do had never been done, because it required a ship whose pilot was willing to take it somewhere that every navigation manual in the Cooperative classified as an exclusion zone. "Seal," Jordan said, "plot the course I gave you." Seal had the course already plotted. She had plotted it 2 hours ago when Jordan had first described it. And then she had run the numbers 4 times and come back to him privately in his quarters and told him the probability of successful transit was 63% under ideal conditions. He had thanked her for the calculation and told her to have it ready. "Course is plotted," she said. "Voss, I need everything the drive has." "You have it," Voss said. Jordan looked at the brown dwarf on the display. A cold brown dwarf, not massive enough to be a star, radiating enough heat and gravity to make the space around it hostile to navigation. The exclusion zone around it was 600,000 kilometers. Every navigation manual said stay outside the exclusion zone because inside it the gravity gradient was unpredictable enough that FTL transit produced exit points that could not be calculated with sufficient precision. Could not be calculated with sufficient precision meant there was a margin of error that would get you killed. It did not mean you could not calculate them at all. It meant the margin of error was unacceptably high by cooperative navigation standards, which defined acceptable as 98% confidence. Seal's calculation was 63%. Jordan had looked at it and thought, I have had worse odds sitting in a Xanthian holding compartment with a relay chip and a jacket lining. Execute, Jordan said. The Antares jumped. Inside a gravity exclusion zone, faster than light transit felt wrong. Every crew member who experienced it said afterward that it felt wrong, that it felt like the ship was being pulled in 2 directions at once, that the transit that should have lasted a fraction of a second seemed to stretch. Voss said later that every alarm in engineering went off simultaneously, and she stood in the middle of them and overrode them manually one by one because she had told Jordan the drive would hold, and she was not going to make herself a liar. They came out of transit 41,000 kilometers from Picket Station Varen, on the far side of the brown dwarf from the Xanthian rearguard, between the Xanthian ships and the station. The exit point was 6,000 kilometers from the calculated position. Close enough. For 4 seconds, nobody on the Antares moved. The bridge crew were processing the fact that they were alive. Jordan was already looking at the tactical display. The Xanthian fast attack ships were reacting, coming about, but they were 200,000 kilometers away and they had been positioned to cover the approach from the other direction, and now there was a cooperative vessel between them and the station they were guarding. Their geometry was wrong. The engagement window they had prepared did not exist anymore. Jordan had 11 minutes before they corrected. "Keth," he said, "target the station's docking collar, non-destructive. I want to blow the exterior lock." Keth was already calculating. 6 seconds. "Do it." The shot was precise. The exterior lock on the station's main docking collar went dark, which meant the Xanthian strike team inside could not open it from the inside. They were not trapped. There were emergency overrides, but the emergency overrides would take time. "Dara," Jordan said into the ship-wide comm, "boarding team, docking collar now. You have 8 minutes." Dara's voice came back steady. "Moving." Jordan looked at the Xanthian ships closing on the display. He looked at what he had available. The Antares had 2 forward-facing weapons arrays and 1 lateral array. Against fast attack ships in open space, that armament was inadequate. But the Antares was not in open space. It was 41,000 kilometers from a brown dwarf, inside the exclusion zone, in a gravity gradient that made targeting solutions harder for everyone equally. The Xanthians had better weapons. They also had better targeting systems. The gravity gradient would degrade their advantage more than it would degrade his, because their targeting systems were optimized for open space engagement and his were not, because his ship was a logistics vessel whose weapons were an afterthought, and afterthoughts were sometimes accidentally well-suited to unusual conditions. Jordan started talking Keth through a targeting solution that Keth had never been taught at the Velhari Naval Institute, because the Velhari Naval Institute did not teach weapons solutions inside gravity exclusion zones, because nobody fought inside gravity exclusion zones. Keth listened. His hands moved across the array. After a moment he said, very quietly, "That might actually work." "It will work," Jordan said. "Be ready." 7 minutes. The Xanthian ships came in fast and confident because fast attack ships were built for fast and confident, and everything about their tactical situation said they had the advantage. They were smaller, quicker, better armed, and they were engaging a logistics vessel that had just done something insane and gotten lucky. That was their read. A desperate captain had made an insane jump and gotten lucky, and now he was cornered between them and the station, and the next 4 minutes were going to be straightforward. The lead ship fired first. The shot was good. It would have been a clean hit in open space. In the gravity gradient of the exclusion zone, it drifted 1,100 kilometers wide. Not because Keth had done anything to avoid it. Because the math inside the exclusion zone was different from the math outside it, and the Xanthian targeting system had been calibrated for outside. Jordan had known it would drift. He had calculated the drift. The Antares returned fire. Keth's solution accounted for the gradient. It accounted for the drift, built the correction in from the start, used the exclusion zone's unpredictability as a variable to be modeled rather than a hazard to be avoided. The shot was not a clean kill. It hit the lead fast attack ship's forward shield array at an angle that did exactly what Jordan had told Keth it would do, folded the shield geometry back on itself, and collapsed the forward coverage entirely. The lead ship was not destroyed. It was opened. Again, Jordan said. The second shot went through the gap. The lead fast attack ship went dark and began to drift. The second Xanthian ship broke off. It was the right tactical decision. It was outnumbered now in any meaningful sense, its partner gone, its tactical picture completely inverted from what it had been 4 minutes ago. It turned and ran toward the FTL limit. Jordan let it go. Dara's voice came over the comm. "We have the station. 6 crew. Alive, some injuries. Xanthian strike team has surrendered." "Jordan." "They surrendered." The bridge was quiet. Seal turned from her console. She looked at Jordan for a long moment. Her Velhari expression was, by the standards of her species, extremely readable. Jordan had learned to read Velhari expressions at the academy. What she was feeling was not something her culture expressed easily, because it was not a common experience for Velhari, who were a species that believed in precedent and procedure and the accumulated wisdom of 400 years of spacefaring civilization. She was feeling the specific sensation of having her accumulated framework revised. That targeting solution, she said. Where did you learn it? I worked it out on the way here, Jordan said. Seal looked at him. In 3 hours. 2.5. She turned back to her console. After a moment, she said, in a voice that was very quiet and very precise, I want to file a formal notation in the ship's log. Go ahead, Jordan said. I want it noted that I was wrong about this posting. Jordan said nothing. He was already looking at the tactical display, reading the drift pattern of the disabled Xanthian ship, calculating salvage options, thinking about the relief forces ETA and what they would need when they arrived. From engineering, Voss's voice came up on the comm. She was not a being who expressed things often or elaborately. She said 2 words. Drive held. Jordan almost smiled. Good, he said. Give it a full diagnostic. I want to know exactly what we stressed. Already running, Voss said. The Antares sat in the exclusion zone of a cold brown dwarf, between a captured station it had just liberated and a drifting Xanthian ship it had just beaten, with its patched hull and its repaired drive and its 61 crew members who had never been supposed to be here. Nobody said anything for a while. The relief force was 4 hours out. The station crew were being brought aboard for medical assessment. The paperwork was going to be extraordinary. Jordan looked at the tactical display and thought about the dead angle on the second Xanthian ship's approach vector, the one he had seen and chosen not to exploit because the first solution had worked. He filed it. He would know it next time. The 9th Expeditionary Group's after-action report on the Varen incident ran to 47 pages. The tactical appendix on the exclusion zone transit and the weapons solution developed under gravity gradient conditions was flagged by Cooperative Fleet Command and forwarded to the Naval Doctrine Division with a recommendation for formal study. The Naval Doctrine Division assigned 3 analysts to it. The analysts spent 2 weeks on the weapons solution. They could replicate it. They could explain it mathematically. What they could not explain, and what the lead analyst put in her summary report as an open question, was how a human officer on a logistics vessel in a hostile contact situation had developed, in 2.5 hours, a targeting methodology that the Naval Doctrine Division had not developed in 400 years of active research. The lead analyst had a theory. She kept it out of the official report because it was not the kind of thing that belonged in official reports. It was the kind of thing you said quietly to a colleague over a meal. Her theory was this. The Cooperative's naval doctrine had been built by beings who expected to survive their mistakes. Beings with long lifespans, with deep institutional knowledge, with the accumulated caution of civilizations that had learned, over centuries, to be careful. Their doctrine was excellent. It was thorough. It was optimized for the kind of warfare that preserved assets and minimized losses and produced sustainable outcomes. It had never been built by a species that came from a planet where everything was trying to kill you from the moment you were born. A species that had clawed its way from stone tools to spaceflight in an eye blink of geological time, that had survived ice ages and plagues and wars of a ferocity that still made xenohistorians uncomfortable, that had developed the capacity to look at a 2.5-hour window with a broken ship and a crew that didn't believe in them and an enemy with every tactical advantage, and see not a death sentence, but a problem to be solved. The Cooperative had a category for what humans were. The category was wrong. The lead analyst finished her meal and did not say any of this out loud. She went back to her office and opened the file on Jordan Hayes and began reading from the beginning. She had a feeling she was going to be reading for a while.